SpongeBob is a beloved series that you have surely known for a long time, and the truth is that it has already become a classic on this channel. Today we will talk about a character that, although not so recurrent, is one of the most mysterious of SpongeBob, an entity that has been lurking in Bikini Bottoms for thousands of years, with an origin and past shrouded in mysteries and crazy theories. That's right, as the title says, today we will talk about the Flying Dutchman, that green ghost that torments Bob and his friends from time to time, whose incredible powers can rival those of the god Neptune, as he is able to grant wishes, levitate, teleport, open dimensional portals, transform himself, create rifts in space-time, and many more things, which we will discuss later on. To begin to talk about the past of the Flying Dutchman, it is necessary to talk briefly about the legend that inspired this character. There are many versions of this legend, but they all coincide in the existence of a ship known as the Flying Dutchman, whose crew was commanded by Captain Willem van der Decken, a stubborn and greedy man who led his crew through dangerous routes in order to increase his fortune. One day, in a storm, his ship was damaged, and with every chance of sinking, the Dutchman met a fate worse than death. Here, there are two different versions of what happens. One is that the captain makes a deal with the devil in order to ensure the survival of his ship and crew. And the other is that a divine being, seeing the captain's vicious behavior, came down from the storm and gave him a punishment. In both cases, the Dutchman, Willem van der Decken, now also known as Davy Jones, ended up condemned along with his crew to wander the oceans eternally, unable to touch any port ever, and in some versions, even collecting the souls of the discarded who cross his path. This legend has become so famous that it has inspired stories in novels, plays, movies like Pirates of the Caribbean, and of course, served as inspiration for the character of the Flying Dutchman. We will return to this legend a little later, but for now, let's take a look at what the series tells us about the origin of the Flying Dutchman. During the first season of SpongeBob SquarePants, in the episode of Squidward the Unfriendly Ghost, when Bob and Patrick go to clean Squidward's attic, they find a comic book with the supposed origin of the Flying Dutchman, where it is narrated that when he died, instead of being buried, his body was used as an ornament for a showcase and as revenge. Now he terrorizes the seven seas because they did not let him rest. This was the first mention of the character, and a few chapters later, on Scaredy Pants, he would appear physically for the first time. Angered by how his appearance has been the basis for many increasingly distorted and pathetic disguises of himself. The thing is, like almost all the characters and stories that appear throughout the series and films, the Dutchman apparently also suffers from inconsistencies in the script, as in later appearances, we can begin to see certain contradictions regarding his comic book origin. In the episode The Curse of Bikini Bottom from season 7, while he is looking for clothes in his closet, he gets sentimental when he finds a coat and says, "It's a little torn, of course it's the shirt they buried me in." Which of course directly contradicts what the comic says, which was probably a false story invented by the publisher. In fact, right in the first episode of the second season, Your Shoes Untied, the Dutchman mentions that he hasn't worn shoes for over 5,000 years. This can be interpreted to mean that the Flying Dutchman has been dead for approximately 5,000 years, which brings up another bunch of weird questions. In his second appearance this season, in the episode Shanghai, we see the Dutchman's greatest display of powers, as he is able to go back in time to fulfill a wish of Patrick and can transport Squidward to another dimension, proving that his magical powers allow him to fulfill any kind of wish, as if he were an underwater Shenlong. But the most important clue to his origin as a specter of evil comes from an episode of the third season. In Born Again Krabs, here the Dutchman tries to take Mr. Krabs to Davy Jones's locker, a place where those who have done wrong in life go. After this, the Dutchman keeps having more and more appearances in other episodes. But for now, this is the material we need to start forming our theories, and we already have a few, so we'll give you the most convincing ones. Our first theory is actually quite simple. To begin with, and as we already saw, the Flying Dutchman is totally inspired by the history of his legend, which is probably why the Dutchman at some point in his past, when he used to be alive, was someone greedy who exploited his crew and traversed the ocean wildly until he met his end on one of his voyages. But we know he is not the ghost of Davy Jones, as this is a different character, played by a real person, and appears in another episode. So the theory goes that, faced with an imminent death and fearing the consequences he might suffer in the afterlife due to his actions in life, The Dutchman managed to make an agreement with Davy Jones, an agreement through which Davy Jones gave the Dutchman's spirit the task of sailing all the oceans in search of souls to torment and, when necessary, pick up tyrants in their death throes to go serve their sentence in the locker. Put another way, Davy Jones is the representation of the devil, of evil, and his locker is the underworld, something like hell. Therefore, the Dutchman functions as an emissary of the devil in the series, owing his power to the literal forces of the underworld. But this theory, although it could well be accurate, is somewhat simple, and in a show like SpongeBob where everything is always more than it seems, we can find much more interesting or strange options. So here goes the next theory. This second theory is definitely the weirdest one we have, as we propose that the Flying Dutchman is not exactly the ghost of a human, and we rely mainly on his ghostly tail. According to this theory, maybe that's not really a tail, but a kind of fin, like the one possessed by certain mermaid-like creatures, such as Mindy and Neptune. I mean, it's a very rare prospect, but postulating that the Dutchman could be a super rare species of semi-transparent newt is one of those crazy ideas we love on this channel. And the best part is that its ghostly tail isn't the only evidence for this theory. As you may remember, on more than one occasion we have relied on SpongeBob comics, knowing that they have several concepts and ideas from Steven Hillenburg, and just in one of them we can see the mother of the Dutchman. She visits her son, has a very rocker style, and also shares the same design of the tail. In itself, that his mother visits him at the bottom of the ocean is quite rare. But also the interesting thing here is that she arrives in the company of a ghost friend of his called Killer, who is completely blue, not green, and instead of a tail has two legs. Which tells us two things. Firstly, this design of the Dutchman and his mom is not the same as other ghosts we have seen in SpongeBob SquarePants. And secondly, it raises a very interesting question. If the Dutchman had fallen victim to a curse with the devil and doomed for all eternity, why would he be getting visits from his mother in the first place? Unless she was on the ship when it sank, which seems unlikely, it gives us other possibilities, such as the possibility postulated by this theory. The Dutchman and his mother are not ghosts of humans, but rather a type of mermaid, distinct from the type of mermaid that Mindy and Neptune are. If we go by mythology, when it comes to creatures like mermaids, there are two main representations that are very different, as some cultures paint them as very beautiful beings with feminine features that safeguard the lives of sailors in troubled waters. But there are others that describe mermaids as deceitful monsters that with their magic lead to misfortune and drown those they cross paths with. So perhaps in SpongeBob there are indeed different types of mermaids, some mermaids being mildly benevolent, like Neptune and Mindy, and others being more evil, like the Dutchman's mother and her son. This would directly explain the Dutchman's powers, since he would be part of the royal family, and suggest to us that maybe he just likes to cause chaos, or who knows, maybe he is in the same part of the family as Pluto, the god of the underworld, since according to mythology, he was Neptune's brother, which would connect him in a somewhat weird way to our first theory, making him a mermaid or a triton working with the underworld. But while the theory is interesting and definitely quite creative, it's clear that it also has quite a few holes. And within the show, it's referenced multiple times that the Dutchman is a ghost and nothing more. So we'll end with my favorite theory about the origin of the Flying Dutchman, the time-traveling ghost pirate theory. This theory was developed a few months ago by Alex Bale, an aspiring film director who makes some great videos about theories from different animated series and movies. His proposal is simple. According to Alex Bale, the Flying Dutchman is, no more and no less, the ghost of Patchy the Pirate. I highly recommend you go watch the original video, but I'll still explain the basics of the theory quickly. You see, we have seen over the years that Patchy tries to make contact with SpongeBob constantly, as he is his biggest fan and is the leader of his fan club. But time and time again he is disappointed by his idol, because after organizing parties, meetings and all kinds of events in Bob's name, even getting world-class celebrities, SpongeBob never shows up, never appears, which causes that clearly, every time the series progresses, Patchy the Pirate is forming a resentment towards Bob, even though Bob doesn't know him. And in his last real appearance, Patchy decides to go personally to congratulate Bob on his birthday, launching himself from a cannon. But he miscalculates the landing and his body is trapped on the surface of a beach, face down and with his head under the sand. Soon after, we see Bob open a giant box and out pops Patchy's head, who finally achieves his dream and is reunited with his idol, which is clearly impossible. Not only because Patchy is suffocating on an island on the surface and because heads alone don't talk, but because the creators have said multiple times that Patchy will never meet SpongeBob. Oh yeah, and because there's a scene right after that one where we see Patchy convulsing the surface of the island with Potty's head. Yeah, I kid you not. This horrible, disturbing scene you see on screen appears in the episode with a birthday song in the background and is obviously a depiction of Patchy's death, as he hallucinates that he's celebrating his idol's birthday in a bikini bottom. After his death, his soul is trapped in the ocean, and taking advantage of Patchy's rage, anger and disappointment, Davy Jones made a deal with him and got him the powers that would eventually transform him into the Dutchman. With the passing of time, several of his human memories would be distorted or lost, and only the feeling of hatred and admiration for SpongeBob would remain in him, since these emotions were the last ones he felt as he passed away. This would explain why he always ends up in Bikini Bottom, and above all, why he constantly shows an interest towards SpongeBob and his social circle, because deep down he is still obsessed with him. The biggest and most obvious problem with this theory is that it is well known that Patchy and Dutchman coexist at the same time, as we see, for example, in the episode Shanghaied, where Patchy is the host and even says that this is one of his favorite episodes when he goes to put it on, even though Dutchman is the main villain of the episode, so this is where the time traveler part comes in. It happens that we have already seen that Dutchman can manipulate time, when in the beginning he shows Patrick that he can travel to the past if he wishes. So even if Patchy died at a future point in the series, Patchy's soul is able to travel to the past just to fulfill his wish and be reunited with SpongeBob. Even in another episode called The Curse of Bikini Bottom, Bob and Patrick shave the Dutchman's beard by accident, and he angrily mentions that it won't grow back for another 10,000 years, but later his beard reappears. Being a ghost, it seems that time affects him differently, and is not necessarily linear for him, so his abilities could go beyond just traveling into the past. But the theory doesn't stop here. When Patrick and Bob show Mr. Krabs their treasure board game, based on a legend of the Dutchman, we see a photograph of the Dutchman when he was alive, and in this photo he can be seen wearing a very particular hat, exactly the hat that Patchy wore. We also know that Patchy always changes hands between the hook and the patch, so it makes all the sense in the world that the Dutchman has neither hook nor patch, because he never needed them. It was a disguise. Even when the Dutchman is going through his clothes in the episode The Curse of Bikini Bottom, we see that he pulls out the exact same outfit that Patchy the pirate wears constantly. So it seems definite that the Flying Dutchman is actually Patchy the pirate time traveler. The original theory is much longer and with more details, as it lasts half an hour, but it is definitely the best achieved theory about the Dutchman, so I invite you to watch it in full on Alex Bale's YouTube channel. And without anything else to say, I hope you liked this video and that the death of Patchy the pirate has not left you nightmares, because it did for me. I honestly think it is the most extreme thing they have put in SpongeBob SquarePants, and I only now find out. Anyway, like the video if you liked it and subscribe for more videos like this one, and see you in the next video. Bye.